Is He-Man one of the healthiest male heroes we've had in years? And why does the internet completely disagree about what this movie is actually saying? We discuss that and more on this episode of the Fandom Portals Podcast with the Masters of the Universe.
Welcome to the Masters of the Universe.
Welcome to the Masters of the Universe. Welcome to the
Adam.
Fandom Portals Podcast. Well, yes, you're Adam, He-Man. And I'll be Tila. Tila with a mustache. Welcome to the Fandom Portals Podcast, the podcast that proves that your favorite film has something to teach you. If you want more from what you watch, then you are in the right place. I'm Aaron, a teacher and a film fan. As always, I'm joined by Brash. So today we're going to be looking at the Masters of the Universe, the 2026 version. We know there's an 80s version as well. And we're probably going to be discussing Adam's search for purpose and the representation of healthy masculinity. We're going to talk about Skeletor and the illusion of power that he has. We're also going to talk about a little bit about meta-modernism. And we're also going to have a caveat on this conversation to say we know that this is a movie called Masters of the Universe about cool action figure selling characters from the 80s. So yes, we're talking about these topics and concepts, but please don't misunderstand the fact that we do know the purpose of this movie is to actually just be enjoyed as a popcorn flick. So there is those two debates going on the internet right now. Have you seen any of that, Brash?
All over the place.
Yeah.
And there's diehard fans who really like the movie, and then there's diehard fans who also don't like the movie, and then there's people who only know Masters of the Universe through like the more recent animated adaptations on Netflix and that also didn't like the movie because it wasn't anything like the new adaptations, which the new adaptations I think are a bit more serious and a bit more...
They seem a bit more political to me, and they seem a little bit more geared towards correcting the wrongs of the 80s cartoon, you could say, in terms of how masculine heroes are represented. I know, for example, that Tila took a primary role in the Kevin Smith cartoon that was on Netflix, and she was kind of mean the whole way through. And Adam kind of took a back seat in that one. I know that wasn't very well received, but yeah, this one's been very polarizing. I've seen across the internet on TikTok and also Instagram. There's a lot of people that really do enjoy the movie, and a lot of people who think that it is just a great pulpy popcorn flick, which is great for the American summer and our whatever season we're in here in Australia. Yeah, hot or dry is what we get. People that are reading into this movie and talking about how the masculine characters are represented. We're doing so in a fun sort of way, in a way that represents these characters and how they differ from the 80s versions of themselves. But yeah, please just know we understand that the purpose of this movie was indeed to entertain. So without any further ado, Brash, do you want to give us your brief synopsis of Masters of the Universe? Adam, tell us about Adam.
Actually, not that brief, but I'll see how quick I can go through.
Well, to be fair, it is a 2 hours and 20-minute long movie.
It is a fairly long movie.
Does it need to be that long?
I didn't expect it to be that long, but I'm kind of glad it was in a way. I think if it wasn't, then I could be far too rushed.
Yeah, I think so too. That being said, I feel like some of the Earth portion of the movie, the first 40 or so minutes.
Remember the movies? That's the first thing I said. When he gets sent to Earth, I'm like, oh, he gets sent to Earth.
Yeah, because we know that in the 80s version, most of the movie took place on Earth due to budget constraints, and not very many people enjoyed that. So, but yeah, after about 40 minutes or so of Adam finding his feet, he eventually made his way back to Eternia, and then the action began. So, without any further ado, Brash.
Long ago, during the final days of a brutal war on the planet Eternia, the infant Prince Adam is sent through a magical portal to Earth to protect him from the ruthless Skeletor, who has seized control of much of the kingdom in his relentless hunt for the Sword of Power. Adam grows up living an ordinary life while the legendary sword remains hidden from him as he searches for it. 15 years later, destiny catches up with him when the Sword of Power reveals itself to him in the grip of what can only be described as a budget Conan.
Yeah.
Guided by the sort of magic sword, Tila arrives to help Adam return to Eternia on her ship, only to discover that his once beautiful homeland has fallen into darkness. Skeletor's army dominates the land, the royal family has been torn apart, and hope has nearly vanished. Adam, after reuniting with Tila and the fearless captain of the Royal Guard, Duncan, who is now a drunken slob, after the sword is taken by Skeletor and it doesn't work for him, he tries to return it to Castle Grayskull, only to find out that the power was within himself all along. And Skeletor not being able to come to grips with that. Fights Adam, loses, and becomes a skull.
Yeah. And there are a lot of tropes through the movie that we have seen very, very regularly through other action movies, especially the idea of a once royal prince or person of royalty of noble birth going into Earth in order to relearn what they once should have known. The primary reason for this is usually so the audience can have a character that they relate to and they're learning things as the main character does. A primary example would be the first Thor movie that came out. In this case, Adam spends the first 15 years looking for this sword. And my brother, shout out Derek, how you going? He mentioned the point, like, how does it take him 15 years to find a sword that just wound up at a comic book shop? And that's what I'm talking about when I'm thinking, like, it's a little bit thinly veiled, this sort of plot device that shows that we definitely needed Adam to grow up external, away from Eternia in this part of the story, in order for him to then go back and see the influence that Skeletor had on it, for him to be shocked and appalled by that, and for Tila to grow up and for the characters to change in the way that they did. It needed that time period to go by. So that's the way that they did it. But this movie is directed by Travis Knight. This is his one of his second or third runs at directing. He actually also did my favorite Transformers movie, which is Bumblebee. He directed that. It also stars Nicholas Galadzine, who's in The Idea of You, a great movie that also stars Anne Hathaway, and we've got Camila Mendes as Tila in Riverdale as well. And one person who surprised me, and also surprised lots of fans, is Skeletor, played by Jared Leto. He didn't suck in this movie, Brash.
No, I don't think he did. Like, a lot of people say he thinks he did. One person I, like, sort of had a glance at their sort of review of the movie, and they really didn't like Jared Leto. Yes, was he not the greatest as the Joker? Probably like the worst.
Probably
Joker
the worst that you could be as the Joker.
But like, even so, like, even before that, he was in the movie Lord of War with Nicolas Cage as Nicolas' brother. I love that movie, and I thought he was really good in that movie.
Good performance in that one. He's obviously also won an Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, so the man can act. I think he's just cursed with choosing poor franchises and roles for the minute, or he hasn't found something that fits into his niche. But playing the quippy, sarcastic, but also eternally evil Skeletor kind of fit his vibe a little bit. So
yes, you can not like an actor, but realistically, it's the director and like the showrunners and the producers,
script as well,
and all that they have to follow. Like, can you blame Jared Leto for being not a very good Joker when, like, the makeup design and the art design and the structure of him and everything like that was created for Jared Leto to portray?
Yeah, so pretty much out of his hands. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think the parts that he did in this with Skeletor, his comedic timing was really good, which I didn't think he had that in him, really.
The crescendo.
But yeah, pulls his fist up. It's very good. And also his chemistry with
Alison Brie.
Yeah, Alison Brie. That was really good as well, being the counterpart to his evil doing. Their scenes together were really, really good. But if we are to analyze this movie for a most valuable takeaway, I would say that this movie's most valuable takeaway is that real strength isn't proving that you're powerful. It's knowing when and why to use your power. And I think this fits for this movie because we follow Adam, who begins the story believing that strength is something that he has to possess in order to rule, because that's how he has to impress his father. Duncan also goes through a transition with how he looks towards strength and how he looks towards his own masculinity. And also Tila does a little bit of changing through this movie as well. But Skeletor represents the flip of that point. And I know a lot of people say that he's just a villain, and that's how they're representing him. And he even says that line, he's just a villain and he likes to be a villain. And that's very, very well and good. But you examine his choices, you examine why he's choosing to be a villain, and you get some little messages there in terms of his relationship to power. Because I reckon that his relationship to power isn't as well constructed or isn't as secure as some of the other characters in this movie, even though he probably has the most physical power and biggest representation of power, being that he controls all of Eternia at the point of the movie that we introduce to him. But Adam eventually learns through this that character, not capability, is what makes someone worthy of that power. There's that scene with what's her name, Brash? The sorceress. There's that scene with the sorceress where she actually reveals to him that it was in him all along, and the reason he was chosen as the vessel was because of all the empathy and the kindness that resided within him all the time. So, and then it comes to that head at the end, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we get more into the characters. But let's talk about Adam. Let's talk about how he was represented in this movie. What are your thoughts of the actor that portrayed him and how he was represented, and Also, how it changes or is similar to that of the cartoon.
I like their casting choice pretty much across the board. Like, even Alison Brie, even though like I look at Alison Brie, and because I've known her in so many other things, seeing her as Eva Lynn sort of like threw me out because
Yeah, I like the way she put on a little bit of a voice and leaned into the camp, and also was admiring Skeletor in a sort of evil, maniacal, mustache twirling way, as both of them really were in the spots that they were in. And I think that's what sold it for me, was the fact that they were actually kind of leaning into the camp.
yeah.
Alison Brie definitely did a good job of that. But
I really did like Idris Elba as Duncan as well, though. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about him. He did a fantastic job. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Duncan was. We'll talk about him a little bit later too, but he's probably my favorite character and representation of how he learns his lesson through the movie about strength. Is probably one of the ones that resonated with me the most. But
Nicholas
Galatzine,
he was. I think that he was probably a perfect choice for Adam, and even like I think it was more so like camera magic and the attire he wore and stuff like that. But have him, it sort of helped him, like the clothes he wore seemed to help him hide his size
at the
a bit
start of the
more.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
realistically, Adam's meant to be like a not small, I would say, but he's not meant to be like a big, like a muscly dude. He's just meant to be just an average guy.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he calls on the power, he hulks up a bit.
Yeah, which we see a definitely CGI rendered version of, where he's basically Popeyeing out of his muscles there. But you're right. They use the pink shirt and the white underneath and then the jeans as well, which is very reminiscent of the meme culture as well. And also his standard attire, we'll say, as Prince Adam. Yeah, and he does that wearing his Earth garb and his uniform for his HR job, which I think is kind of what he fell into in terms of HR, because that's where he aligns himself in terms of his kindness and his empathy. And when he approaches lots of different conflicts, I've also read a couple of comments online that have said, why does he have to try and talk to everybody all the time first? And, I feel like that's kind of central to his character, where he does try to use any other element or any other way to avoid violent conflict as he possibly can. And, he talks about how he's unsure in his belonging, especially in terms of Earth, and he knows that he's destined for greater things, and he's obsessing about how he has to find the sword, to the point where he's ostracizing himself on all different relationships on planet Earth until he finds his housemate, who's largely accepting of his weirdness, which is great. But one thing I loved about that sort of friendship connection that he had with his housemate was we saw another representation of masculinity there, where he's sitting there watching all of these different sort of romance movies like The Notebook, and then there was the other one as well, 10 Things I Hate About You, both absolute classics that I love. But he was like crying toward them, and then as soon as Adam walked in, he'd hide the fact that he was being emotional with the movies, which I think is relatable to a lot of guys, but also that stigma is getting broken down as well, where it's okay to cry in movies. We've talked about it all the time as well. We cry in movies. It's all good here. But yeah, I think that Adam is definitely discovering who he wants to become before he's accepting the destiny of being, Prince of all Eternia. He doesn't go around saying that he has a mantle that he has to take on for the purposes of the power. I think it's more for him that he wants to belong to something, and he doesn't feel like he belongs on Earth. And that's why he wants to get back so badly.
I have seen a lot of things out there, especially like towards the last fight, or even the fight against Lockjaw.
Yep.
Where like he's summoned the power, punches Lockjaw in the mouth, and goes, "He shouldn't be hurt. He should be able to go all day." Blah. I always try and, in my mind, like think of like the alternative, or like a different, because realistically, anyone who watches anything and what they take in, they can take in with their, like, everyone has their own point of view on things. So one person can watch a movie and see it one way, another person can watch a movie and see it completely different way. And so I always try, and when I watch anything, read anything, do anything, I always try and think of different possible ways that it can be interpreted. And for me, like in that moment, that's the first time he's used the power.
Yeah.
He doesn't have, well, for me, it doesn't seem like he has full control over it. So he may only have a portion of that strength. So he may have got a bit bigger and got stronger, but he was still like having a hard time beating Lockjaw. So for me, that's him not fully accepting the power, because he doesn't want violence. He doesn't want to fight. he wants to talk things out and wants to like peace and love, man.
Yeah.
And that's how I interpret it, as that's his first time using the sword. He doesn't have full control. He's not full He-Man.
I think that for him not being able to be as physically strong as he was at the end of the movie when he was facing Lockjaw in the middle is definitely, it goes to show that his physical strength is only one aspect of becoming a protector. Like, he definitely has embraced that power when it sort of came to him in that moment. He did the chant and channeled the energy through the sword, and he physically looks the part. But, you know, as you said, he definitely hasn't adapted to that new strength. And also, growing up, he was never really good at that aspect of being physical in the first place. If we remember early on in the movie when he was training with Duncan, he'd always get smacked around by Tila to the point where he disappointed his father and granted him disapproving nods and a lifetime of turmoil and misery from that relationship as a result of the fact that he actually can't fight very well. So I think if he went in there and was immediately able to fight Lockjaw with immaculate prowess, it would have been less realistic, we'll say, to me, because he was a person who always leaned into that conversation first, and he never ever solved things with violence to start with, which I think is a great aspect of his character. And it takes that gradual shift that we were talking about away, where it would have taken that gradual shift away, and we wouldn't have then got to grow into the moment where he does then learn that he has the power, and he says that pivotal line, which I think has been used lots of different times when men are talking about being protectors and being physical. They definitely say, I have the power inside of me. I just prefer not to use it. And I think that's the mantra of men being masculine, but men also being protectors in that space as well. You have the capability to do what you need to do to protect your family, to protect your loved ones, to protect Eternia, to do all these things, physically beat the absolute crap out of Skeletor. But if there is another way, you will explore all other avenues prior to doing so. And I think that was a really good line to put in at the end of the movie, especially coupled with the fact that Skeletor said, I just like being a villain. So, like, He-Man said everything that he possibly could. He tried to convince him to change his mind. He looked in a different direction. He tried to change the way that Skeletor's thinking was in terms of power. All of that failed, and Skeletor himself said, I don't want to change. So that was the time when He-Man said, okay, then, here is the power. And sometimes that's what has to happen if you're a protector of a magical kingdom called Eternia. You have to throw down against a skull-faced man.
Yeah. And I really actually really enjoyed his character arc through this movie, because you'll see, like, when he first uses gets the power against Lockjaw, he's very not with it. And then sort of towards the end where he sort of leans into the fact that, oh shit, I'm going to have to actually use violence. And that's when he's ripping off his arm and stuff like that. And that's when he's actually just showing his strength fully. And then in that state later when they're doing the ship fight, because he's more leaned into that, he's not taking damage and stuff like that. And then you see once they crash land and they're safe, and he lifts up the aircraft for Tila, and he's lifting up like fairly easily with one hand. But then he's like he's like, I can do this all day. But then he's like, but can you hurry up? It's actually kind of getting heavy.
This is actually kind of heavy, yeah.
I feel that's more so because now he's relaxed and he doesn't have that adrenaline. He doesn't have that power. He's sort of falling back into his sort of empathetic self, and then fighting to save his dad at Skeletor's castle. And you see him fully, like, that's, I think, when he sort of fully leans into power again. He's a bit sheepish at first, but quickly falls to the sink and gets that power, starts beating everyone up. And then it's afterwards when he causes, he himself, with all the damage and the strength that causes the cave in, that ultimately ends his father. I think that's sort of like after that, he's sort of like, oh shit, I've gone too far. And that's where I think of where he's like, where he tried to fully embrace the power, wasn't ready to embrace it.
So in Skeletor's lair, when Adam is using his power as well to fight off all of Skeletor's goons and his father's there, he uses that power in a very violent way, and he uses it while he's angry and desperate. And you can look at the fact of using those different sort of elements of physicality for the right reasons, but in the wrong way. And I think it can definitely communicate some of those times where men can use their strength in a manner that feels correct and feels protective, but then it can also hurt those that we care about if we're not careful or if we use it in an incorrect way. So the cave-in representing the unforeseen consequences of using strength when it's uncontrolled.
Yeah.
And then by the time he ends up facing Skeletor face to face at the very end, that's a very much more controlled fight. You can see that the camera freezes in on the punches, showing for the fact that they are controlled hits. He's choosing to use that power where he can, whereas in that lair, he was swinging the sword, I'll say wildly, but he was definitely using it precisely. But he was chopping down person left, right, and center and throwing them into walls and using improvised weapons where he could. That was more a rageful power to me as opposed to a controlled protective power at the end. And I think the film navigates that really well, the way he progresses in his power. But what's interesting to me is seeing Teela, who is obviously the daughter of Duncan. Her role and her strength ends up, she has to be really, really strong at the very start because her father is physically weak in that moment. So Duncan goes into this alcoholic episode because he has perceived that his version of masculinity and his version of strength has failed. He can't protect anybody like he wanted to. So Teela would have had to grow up quicker than she would need to and take on leadership positions quicker than she would need to in order for her to become this fierce warrior of strength. And we see that when Adam's a bumbling oaf, I'll say in quote marks at the start of the movie, she's the one that comes in and rescues him from Beastman. She's the one that's physical. She's the one that's controlled. She's the one using her power in that manner. And as Adam learns and grows into his masculine strength, you can see that she then begins to soften a little bit as well. And yes, she's just as lethal and she still has the power within her too. But she then falls into a role where she is supporting those characters around her to lean into their strength whilst also embracing her own. And that's also the time when Duncan then is able to realize, hey, there's more to being a strong leader, a strong father, and having my identity attached to being the protector, the man at arms. There's more that I can do here, because I think he definitely fails to acknowledge the power that he had Adam early on in his life when his father was rejecting him because he didn't show that physical strength. But Duncan was the one that was in his ear saying, when he turns around, he's going to see you standing up. And Duncan always says as well, a man stands up when he is needed, which is another healthy trait of masculinity that he does hold. I feel like he's definitely a character, and if we're talking about Duncan, he's definitely a character where he's the strongest man in the Masters of the Universe, but he's a man that learns that he's still valuable after he fails. And I think that's important for him, and it's definitely one of the better transitions in the movie as well.
My favorite arc in this movie of any of the characters is Roboto.
Roboto, played by Kristen Wiig. Yeah.
My favorite character.
Well, she was brain controlled into being servitude, basically.
Yeah.
By Duncan. Because he was scared of her strength, we'll say. He was scared of the fact that, what she could do, because he harmed her or she harmed him to the point where he had to turn the switch. And then in the end, he ends up trusting her.
Because after that scene in the cell, I'd call it, where she's cleaning up, because that's when he releases her, because he's like, if you want me to get out, you have to release me. And he's like, okay. And then just pulls out one little toggle, and she's like, and they're like,
you had it all along?
Yeah. But yeah, Roboto's one of my favorite characters to that whole thing, because she sort of reminds me of because she's always that, she has that dark humor where she's talking about what was it? It doesn't matter. Existence is a series of absurdities leading to infinite nothingness. And she's just my favorite the whole time. And of course, at one stage, I think, when we're in the movies, you saw, I was fucking tappy on the shoulder or some shit when it happened. But of all the characters to fall, she's the one that got absolutely destroyed, and I was so hurt. I was so worried that she was going to be the character that was dead, and it hurt my heart. And I'm like, of course they killed my favorite character.
Yeah, I know. You verbalized that out loud as well. But, I like that she came back with her see-through casings, which is reminiscent of the cartoon show as well. I love that part. For me, it's how she has that relationship with Duncan as well. Yeah. And he's...
Well, so the thing is, he's the whole time he was so worried about, her hurting them. And, the whole time, because I wish we had a scene or had some sort of flashback or something of what happened. And, I would have loved to have seen it through Duncan's eyes first. See through Duncan's eyes, and it's basically got Roboto just beelining and trying to assassinate him, when realistically later on it's revealed
there was an evil guy behind him.
Yeah, exactly. It was revealed that she wasn't over him at all, and that he was just freaked out, turns out that she was always his protector. Like, even though she's a little bit pissed at the fact that he took away all her abilities, like fighting abilities, she was still the one in there cleaning the cell, cleaning up his vomit, and still the one there who was always with him and helping him.
Yeah, pretty much guiding him through his broody alcoholism, because he did rest his entire identity on the fact that he had to be a protector. He failed at that. But then he didn't consider the people that remembered him for his kindness, his guidance, his sacrifice, and then also who saw his victories in another way. Like Adam noticed his kindness when he was being nice to him when his father wasn't. And Tila obviously recognized the fact that despite the fact that she was in a class full of ample warriors as well, he still took the time to recognize her personally, saying, you know, that's my girl when she got something correct, and she would recognize the fact that, you know, they were kin, they were connected in that way. So he has this shame over failing his oath, but I think as he transitions through the movie, he learns to fight not for revenge, which is probably something he could have easily done. And they could have leaned into that too. Man of Arms is trying to get revenge on Skeletor for taking everything away from him, for taking away his purpose. But I feel like it was better that they leaned on the fact that he was fighting for a renewed purpose, in the fact that he was being better for his daughter, for one, because his conversation with Adam says, you know, I'd rather her see me as an invaluable drunk than someone who's lost all their strength. And then Adam sort of picks him up, and they both stand up together and say, you know, this is what we're going to be. We're going to fight together. We're going to stand up together. And that's, you know, leaning on people that you need at the time when you need them. And that's another trait of
and that's those HR skills.
Yeah, exactly right. Fighting through with your brother. That's the one. That's exactly what it is. But I think he helped so many people in this movie become stronger, including Roboto, including his daughter Tila, including Adam as well. And I think all of them in that space, they kind of took him for granted a little bit, but he also had a lot of the work to do on his own. He could have chose to wallow in his pity for as long as he did, but then as soon as Adam came back, he kicked into gear. He chose to make the decisions in order to get active again. And there was a teething period there, which I can recognize as well in some real life situations too. You know, when somebody's let you down a bunch of times, you're reluctant to let them back into the saddle again, it might say. And Tila shows that as well when Duncan's saying, let me take the lead, give me a gun, let me do it. Tila's saying, no, just sit there, let me drive, you just be drunk and do what you need to do. But I think her eventually falling into trusting him once again and seeing Roboto and also Duncan fight at the end and hold off all that army in the bridge. It was, and then her allowing him to do that was her letting go of the control that she's had to have exactly for this whole time. And it's Duncan falling back into that role of protector, but that role of protector now has a lot more facets to it than just physical protection, which I think is great for Duncan's character. Masterfully played by Idris Elba as well. And I think you could have done a lot of corny things with a character called Man at Arms, but this is probably one of the best things that they could have done. I think Travis Knight really knocked it out of the park with his character.
Yeah, no, Duncan was probably like one of the best characters in the movie, especially arc-wise.
Yeah. We might go now and talk to the 80s mustache-twirling villain known as Skeletor, and how his relationship with power sits in this movie, and how some people say that he is just a villain, and some people say that there's a little bit more to him. But, you know, there's that quote at the end when, you know, He-Man says, I have a proposition for you. Why don't we just end this cycle of violence? And then Skeletor ends it by saying, you boobed. Yeah. And then he goes on to say, it's just my nature. You'll never change me with funny words. I am the villain, and it feels very good to be the villain. And, you know, I feel like that is definitely true. He's a mustache-twirling villain that we really want to look at, and it's refreshing to have a villain that's a villain. You don't have to look at the other side of the coin for in that space. Yeah. But I feel like the reason he is a villain is important to look at as well, and it's because of his relationship with that power, you know. He wants the power because he wants to be strong, and he wants everyone to be terrified that he has it. And that's the difference between Skeletor and Adam, whereas Adam's trying to use the power to help those around him. Skeletor is trying to use it to control those around him. Two very different things. And some people can use control as a means of protection, but in this case with Skeletor, I think he's simply just using it as a fact to get people to follow him and fall into line.
Yeah, and I know because I think I do like when they do the same first letter, when he does the same first letter insults. It's the same thing they used to do with the cartoons. It's been a long time since I've watched any of the old cartoons or read any of the old comics. But Hordak, who is the leader of the evil horde, is like the antagonist for She-Ra. I know I'm not sure if they say it in the Netflix He-Man shows or if it's in the She-Ra shows. The Skeletor is actually a minion of Hordak, and I think in that sort of thing, his obsession with getting power is to eventually have that power to be stronger than Hordak and take over and become the new leader of the Horde, the evil Horde.
Yes.
But that's what I say. I'm not sure if they're going to tie in Hordak with Skeletor at some point.
Yeah, I think Skeletor works best when he doesn't have a convoluted backstory. Like in that aspect, I like that he's just evil for evil's sake, and he has this obsession with power because he's terrified of not having it, but also he's got this hollow understanding of power where he's obsessed with the sort of power in order to get the respect and get the control of everything around him. Like he's got Eternia pretty much under his fist, but he still needs that sword because if that sword isn't his, then somebody can come in and give that power to somebody else. And he fears losing it. He needs greater weapons. He needs greater status. He needs greater control. And nothing internal or external will ever satisfy this need for power that he has. And I think that's a villainous motivation that I can get behind. And, to the point where it shows itself in verbal abuse of his followers in terms of the wisecracking insults that he gives them all the time. The mass ridicule as well when we see Moss Man and he just burns him in front of everybody and everybody just laughs and his laugh echoes in the laughter of the followers around him, and then as he stops, everybody stops around him. So he's got that element of control there. And also his escalating threats of violence, especially towards Evelyn, really show that insecurity around his fragility of power. And I think, you can say that he's a villain for villain's sake, but I also think that you can look at the why of the fact that he's a villain and not so much the backstory, but just the motivation of, he has this insecurity inside him where he doesn't really think that much of himself and needs external validation from others or power in order to have that confidence, in order to show that sort of that masculinity, which is in fact fragile in his terms. But I like the fact that Jared Leto played him off as confident in the way that he vocalized his lines, because it definitely shows that taunting that he does when Adam's at his weakest as well. And that's another faculty of the villain that we can talk about too, is the fact that he does taunt his adversaries at their moment of weakness, and he really plays on their absolute weaknesses as well, because he knows that Adam's relationship with his father isn't good. And then that moment of confrontation that they have, who does he have standing there in front of him for him to see? His father. And then he plays on the emotional disconnect that they have in terms of father and son there. And then the moment that it starts to slip out of his control is when he then, plays the nasty card. And then Adam is left holding the pieces of that. And he's the first one to then blame him for the accident, we'll say, that ended up ending his father's life, which he knows will probably live with him for a long time. But it's that kind of multifaceted level of abuse that really makes him that violent character of Skeletor, and all the while being extremely cartoonish, extremely villainous, and extremely just larger than life in his performance of Villainy. So I liked the fact, and this is spoiler alert, not that none of this hasn't been, but spoiler alert at the end when he is a skull on the floor and Evelyn comes and picks him up, the henchman is still under the control of that power that they see him have, that hollow version of power. And then you hear that laugh, which says, he's going to come back, because the villain always returns, for one, from the 80s cartoons, but then also, that element of that power-hungry element of Eternia is never going away, but also of humanity is never going away. So if there was going to be a sequel, which I don't know if there will, based on the box office performance, I would like to see definitely more Skeletor playing him exactly the way that he was before, because I think Jared Leto is probably my favorite role that he's done in this space.
Yeah,
but
I would say if they do bring in do a She-Ra movie, and then eventually if ever they tie it back together, I would love to see, because Hordak's a bit more serious, he's more serious evil. He's like a big company boss. He'll do horrendous things to you, and he won't joke about it, won't laugh about it, won't have some little quip. He'll just do it.
Well, yeah, because Skeletor never murdered anyone that he probably could have. He locked them all up in a cell.
Yeah.
There wasn't that element of his villainy, whereas I think if you're looking at a more serious villain like Hordak may or may not be.
But the way I think they could play off of that is, and still play into sort of more of the how sort of quirky Skeletor, even though he is a villain and he is evil and a villain, he has that sort of quirkiness and quickness to him, like with his wit and his intelligence. They could play like how I'd like to see if they were to do it to them to play off each other is sort of Skeletor being like sort of like the jealous sort of type and the one who he has to try and one up Hordak and be that sort of like still doing just his evil thing, but he has to show that he's the evilest. He's the evilest. But things
you could even do it as, say, Adam needs to take out this evil villain of this ultimate evil of Hordak, and the only way he can do it is because he needs the help of Skeletor to do so, and Skeletor agrees to take out Hordak because he also wants to be the biggest villain that he could possibly be. So they're working together in that space.
There's no love lost between Hordak and Skeletor. I can see them doing a bit of a team up, only for like Skeletor to try and like double cross He-Man and get rid of Hordak so that he can take control of the Horde and he becomes the big evil mastermind.
Well, one thing they're going to have to overcome if they're going to do that, and this is probably my biggest critique of the movie of Masters of the Universe. So my biggest critique of Masters of the Universe is the fact that if you are extremely tired of the tongue-in-cheek jokes that happen during serious moments of the movie, then this is absolutely full of them. Masters of the Universe is something that leans into something I talked with Ben Wright about called Meta-Modernism. And it's how Hollywood has forgotten to be sincere in a moment. So you can see moments where, for example, Adam gives his gigantic speech and rousing speech to the other champions of Eternia. And then as they're walking out during their big hero moment to that massive, awesome music, they start choking on the smoke. And it's just like, it just undercuts the fact that the big triumphant moment has happened. Instead of letting the audience live and breathe in that moment, it's almost just going for the cheap laugh. And I guess this is where audiences are divided, because on the one hand, you either are okay with that because you're not fatigued with that sort of meta-modernism trope in movies, or you're over it to the point where just anything can be considered a joke. And the people to blame is Marvel, because it's definitely a Marvel trope that things are coming from, even to the point where the jokes are so frequent, the emotional scenes lose their sincerity. But the only part that I liked about this meta-modernism trope was the way that Adam reacted to the names like Fisto and Ram Man. I thought that was actually a creative spin on it. Instead of leaning into the fact that this is what the people in this legend and lore is called, they made a modern sort of take on why those people were called that. Is because a 10-year-old boy actually went through and that's how he remembers his father's men. But in terms of like late phase Marvel movies, especially, they used it regularly to diffuse tension. And I think some of them were ill-timed. What were your thoughts on that, Brash, in terms of the comedy and the humor?
See, I'm a slut for it. I love it. Like I watch anything like Brooklyn Nine, like the whole thing is just silly nonsense constantly. That gosh, is my jam. I love it. Because when you talk about like the smoke scene where they crash out, they do the triumphant moment of knocking down the wall, and then like the smoke all gets built up from when the wall gets knocked down, and then they all start choking the smoke. I thought it was fucking hilarious. I thought it was kind of gold. I thought like hell yeah. And then what would happen when you knock down a giant stone wall in a sand-filled or dirt-filled cave,
enclosed space,
in an enclosed space, you will get a massive dust cloud that will choke you if you breathe it in, and that shit won't settle easy. It'll get fucking thrown up in the air, and it'll get stagnant in that air in that cave, in like the cave tunnels. And for that, I was like, "Ha, that's so good." But
do you think that the doing that and the approach of always making everything the butt of its own joke, do you feel like it's them reassuring the audience that they know how ridiculous the source material is, and therefore preventing the audience from realizing that it's silly before they actually do? Like, we know it's silly, so we'll make a joke about it. So therefore you don't think it's silly and critique us for it later.
Yeah, well, I can understand how like a lot of people are saying like they probably went a bit overboard. But what I feel is they're probably like, as we've seen with a lot of reimaginings and retellings and live action adaptations and stuff like that recently, is you're never going to please everyone. That you're just not. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to create something from something else and everyone's going to love it. It's just not possible. All fandoms are way too toxic for it. Like, it's they're all like there are like people who aren't, obviously. Not I'm not saying everyone is, but like a lot of the fandoms you'll find are gatekeepy. That's like they're dead stuck on the source material. Even like people fight over like the manga to anime adaptation, and then they fight over the animated like the like Japanese voiced anime to dub. They fight over that, and then they fight over live action when live action's made, and everyone hates that. But then usually it's all three of them then turn their hate to the live action. And I think in our day and age, no matter what people try and do, no, they're not going to please everyone. So I think this was their way of saying this is just something just a fun watch. Don't take it seriously. Like you can love it, you can hate it. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be a straight off the page or straight from the old comics in live action. It is just a funny take on an old 80s cartoon
that was designed to sell toys. I think they landed the plane on that, honestly. I mean, it was getting a little bit tired for me towards the end, but for the most part, especially Skeletor's quips and things like that, I felt like they were well timed. It was just some of the more, I'll say, tear-jerking moments or sincere moments of the movie that I kind of wish they stayed in for that little bit longer. But yeah, I think
then everyone would be expected to take the movie more seriously.
Well, that is very true as well. But that's the thing that you can also look at as well. You know, they acknowledge the silliness, but they can also then still ask the audience to care about it too. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. But
no, but I still like. I was almost fucking furious and gonna throw shit at the screen when Roboto died.
Yeah.
Like, I got attached. Like, I think it just depends on like what you focus on in the movie to find your attachment. Like even I'll watch something like an adaptation, like a live action adaptation of something that I know, and how they've done it in the live adaptation is different to how they did it in the original source. But I'll see that moment, and it will like my mind will flash back to the original moment. And even though the live adaptation is not the same, I know what that moment means. And yes, they've done it a different way or a different way to suit the live action aspect. I'll still tear up about it because I know what that means. In that moment. I don't have to. And that's a thing like with the recent season of Avatar. Like that's currently getting a crazy amount of heat at the moment. And there was moments in that where I was like tearing up because I remember those like parts of that from the TV show because it like brought me back to that. And it's the same with Masters of the Universe. I'm like, there's no reason why you can't like the original source and then watch the live adaptation and also like that because it's not like shitting on the original source. The original source is always going to be there. You can always watch the original source.
I felt like they respected the original source in this one pretty well. Like there was lots of Easter eggs that people could see as well.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't, especially with Masters of the Universe. Like it's not going to be a 1-for-1, and if you don't like it, then you still got the original you can watch. Like you can go back to the original, or if you prefer the newer Netflix animated shows, still have them you can watch. Like I don't see why you have to hate another sort of look or another retelling of a story when you still have the original.
And I think that
it's not taking anything away from the original. The original's always going to be there. The original's always going to be the original.
Yeah. And I think that more people should look at it from that perspective where you can see this as just that popcorn flick that you can sit there and enjoy. Or if you want to take more from it, you absolutely can. Like, I think there are some good lessons that you can take from this, especially the fact that, it teaches that violence should always be the last answer with Adam facing off against Skeletor. And,
with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. That's another lesson that can be molded in with this through Spider-Man. But, Adam also rejects unnecessary force. He negotiates, he compromises, he offers Skeletor another path. In this movie and in life, really, you either see strength as celebrated without compassion, or when it has compassion, it can sometimes be mistaken for weakness. But I feel like Master of the Universe suggests that there's a middle ground where Adam, Duncan, and Teela show that courage isn't the absence of empathy or anything like that. It's the physical capability and it's the measure of your character as well, which I think is the real embodiment of power. And I think that if you take that message from this, that's really great. But if you also just look at it and watch it as a popcorn film where you can just be entertained and laugh at various different jokes that may or may not be ill-timed, then that's a good way to take it as well. And I think this is definitely polarizing the internet, but I really like discussing the fact that we can enjoy both of those sort of perspectives at the one time. So
I enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. No, I like the fact it didn't take itself so serious, and I think the universe is what sort of, because you know how much I hate the Aragon movie.
Yes,
I think it
clinically and documented on this podcast.
Yeah. Well, watching Master of the Universe now, I'm sort of like, yes, it's still, this is not my favorite, and I don't plan on going and watching it every Saturday night. But I think because of like Masters of the Universe, it sort of gave me a little bit a different perspective on it. Like I've
Look at
always
you, Brash, maturing in your fandom.
I
can't believe it.
Like, that's the thing, because like I reread just recently reread the books, and I'm now reading the Murtagh book, the continuation on the story of Murtagh after the final book. And that's why I have to remind myself that the original source is always going to be there. If I want to, I can always go back and read those books again. And I think that's the same with like adaptations of any sort, and especially like, and Master of the Universe helped me teach that, where I was like, I love the fact that it's not taking itself so seriously, and it's just it can just be a fun watch, and I don't have to think about the Netflix anime show or animated shows I watched this, or the She-Ra show I watched this, or the old 80s cartoons I used to watch when I was a kid of this, or the old comics I used to read, like the toys I used to play with.
Yeah, there's no homework associated with this movie.
Yeah, and I think is like I can always go back and revisit those things. This is just another story in the universe that is Masters of the Universe.
All right, and that is it for this episode of the Fandom Portals Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked the show, make sure you share it with a friend, because that really gets the word out about our podcast, helps us lots and lots. We have amazing episodes on YouTube now that is full of visual features, so if you're listening to this and you want to see our faces more, definitely go and check out our YouTube. And if you're YouTubing this and you don't want to see our faces anymore, then go and check out the podcast. There's something for everybody. So definitely go and do that. Like, subscribe, and share. That's all we ask of you guys. And thank you so much for sticking around till the end, guys. We'll see you on our next episode. This is Aaron. Keep learning, keep growing, keep loving fandoms. We'll see you next time.
By the power of Grayskull, I have the power.